Let's bow for a quick word of prayer. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. We are talking during Advent about redemption. And redemption is a topic that we usually get into when we get to Easter time, right? There's the cross, there's the empty tomb. It's all about redeeming humankind to God through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. But we got to remember that the cross and the empty tomb don't happen without first there being the manger. And so that's what we're talking about during Advent, and we're having a little fun with this. It's a heavy topic, but we're having some fun with it by exploring the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. We're looking at the redemption of old Ebenezer as told by the Charles Dickens 1843 book, A Christmas Carol. And we're using the book and the movies to illustrate certain points about what this means to be redeemed, how we can find those things that make us redeemed. Well, old Ebenezer, you might remember, he's a miserable old guy. He has no living friends. He has one living relative, his nephew, Fred. He doesn't have anything to tie him to the community at all, other than his money. That's what he loves. And over the years, because of that, old Ebenezer has managed to isolate himself. He's kind of a hermit because it's mutual. He doesn't like people. People don't like him either. He doesn't give them much of a reason to. In the story that we've been talking about, he's visited by his friend here. It's the ghost of Jacob Marley. Jacob was his business partner for years and years and years, and together they basically swindled people. Or at least they took advantage of them. They weren't kind. And so Jacob comes back to Ebenezer trailing this heavy, long chain. And he tells Ebenezer that he made that chain link by link every time he wasn't kind to someone. Every time he took advantage of somebody, he made another link. Anytime he had a chance to help, and he didn't, he made a choice to make another link. And by the way, because he died 7 years earlier, Ebenezer's got 7 years extension of that same chain. Jacob is there to try to redeem his friend Ebenezer. Probably the one good act Jacob Marley ever did, and it took him until he died to do it. Well, in this story, thanks to Jacob and Ebenezer and the three ghosts that we're going to meet, we actually learn the four facets of Advent. If we look closely enough and we try to understand it, we actually get to the four pieces. Remember, Jacob came and that provided Ebenezer with hope. His life didn't have to be this way. He could change. Hope was the first week. And then the ghost of Christmas past came. And the ghost of Christmas past showed Ebenezer all the things that he used to do. He really did love people at one time. He really did have relationships. People respected him and he respected them back. He wasn't always who he was now. And that gave Ebenezer the beginnings of a sense of peace. The second week. Peace of mind, body, and spirit. Well, next we're going to meet the ghost of Christmas present. This Santa-looking guy is going to take Ebenezer on a little cruise through the air. He's going to teach him about what is life like for other people. How do others see other folks? How do they love each other? And old Ebenezer is going to learn that there actually is love in the world. And most importantly, there's love in him. We can learn that too. But before we get started in that story, because it's going to be pretty fast moving, we need to focus just a little bit on some scripture. I want to look at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. It reads like this. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. May God add a blessing to the reading, hearing, and understanding of Scripture. The translation's pretty easy for this. Don't forget love. Don't forget what it's like to love. Don't forget what it's like to be loved. Don't ignore it. Now, you can't look at that as romantic, love, and that's part of it, but that's only a part of it. Because Ebenezer is also going to learn what it's like to love people just because we need to care for our fellow man. Look at us in this church today. What are the things that we can love? We have a homeless population that is around this area. We can show love to them. We can show love to the people who were embattled by those tornadoes this weekend. What about love for the marginalized in our society? However they got that way. The people who are cast off in the shadows, we can show love to those people as well. Ebenezer understands, and the Ghost of Christmas Present understands where Ebenezer is coming from, because we know there were two big life-changing events that happened for Ebenezer that really soured him on the world. The first one, remember last week, the Ghost of Christmas Past taught us about Ebenezer's beloved sister dying in childbirth when Fred was born. And then we find out that because he turned so sour after her death, he starts to worry only about himself. He doesn't care about the rest of humanity anymore. And his fiancée, Alice, finally has enough and says, you are not the person that I fell in love with. You love money and your prestige more than you do anything or anyone. So she breaks off the engagement. The Ghost of Christmas Present is going to take Ebenezer on to a lot of different places. Now in the book, it's slightly different than the movies because they tried to keep the movies shorter. In the book, he also takes Ebenezer to a lighthouse, and he takes him to different villages to help show him what love looks like in the world. But we're going to focus on three that were basically the three that they focus on in the movies. So this is going to be quick and easy today, but it's going to be important, I think. One is Scrooge's nephew's house. A second is going to be where his fiancée ends up and the work that she does. And the third one is going to be at the home of Bob Cratchit. So let's go through these together. The first scene I want to explore together is the home of Scrooge's nephew. Now remember, Scrooge did not approve of the marriage because the woman that Fred chose to marry didn't have any money. She wasn't going to bring any economic benefit to this relationship, therefore the family. And so Scrooge, who sees everything in dollars and cents, thinks that this is a senseless marriage. Forget about love. What does that matter? How much money could she bring in? That was what he was concerned about. The Ghost of Christmas Present takes Ebenezer to the home of Fred on Christmas Day when there is a group of people, none of them related, they're all just friends, and they come together for a dinner. He sees them playing games. He sees them laughing, having fun. He sees them showing love through each other, through fellowship, through a sense of community, embracing each other for who they are. That's a really foreign concept to old Ebenezer. He doesn't have any idea what that's like because he's off by himself. Most of us are actually communal creatures. It's why COVID, I think, hit us so hard, because remember the early days? We were stuck in our homes. Boy, if you didn't like your spouse, you were in big trouble, okay? Oftentimes, it was just you and your significant other, or maybe a couple of close friends, but that was about it. And then your dog or your cat, and that was the extent of your community. Well, Scrooge doesn't even understand that. He's all by himself. So the question to ask today is, which type of person are you? Are you going to embrace the sense of community and the love that comes from sense of community, or are you going to try to be by yourself and do it all by yourself with no help? See, this is not, I want you to be clear, this is not an introvert versus an extrovert debate. I am an introvert. I had to really train myself to be extroverted. 20 years as a journalist, you have to do that. And then when I went into full-time ministry and communications, I had to keep that up. And in pastoral ministry, you definitely have to do that. But at the heart, I am an introvert. I'm perfectly happy reading a book at home, by myself, maybe the dog. That's about it. I force myself to be out among people. So are you taking steps to be part of a community of faith? And I mean really taking steps to be part of it. Being in worship is a great start, but are you part of a community where you're interacting with other people? If you're a member in the United Methodist Church, you are asked to make a commitment to the community of faith by pledging 5 things, right? Your support by your prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. And it means being actually part of the community. It means being in love with other people. Now, don't misunderstand me. I do not want the church to become a country club. Holy cow, do we have enough of that garbage going on in the world already, especially in the church? What I'm talking about is legitimate showing love to other people by being in ministry with them, in community with them, to show love to other people. We often hear when people step away from the church something along like this: well, I just wasn't being fed. The church wasn't feeding my spirit. That's a problem. Now, I agree that the church should feed your spirit, but it's a funny thing that you can't eat unless you come to the table. You have to be there. You have to be part of the community to be part of the community. It's an easy concept, but sometimes it's a difficult one that we forget about. Second part of love. So the first one was showing love through community. Second place that the Ghost of Christmas Present takes Ebenezer is to Alice's workplace on Christmas Day. She is most definitely not one of the money type people. She's not a financial services type. She's not one of those. She is working with the poor and the sick, the outcast in 1843 England. That's her job. Remember when we go back to the very first week, Hope, we have 2 guys that show up at Ebenezer's place of business and say, we want to raise money to buy meat and drink for the poor. How much can we put you down for? And he says, nothing. And they say, well, why not? He says, well, I pay taxes. Are the workhouses still open? Are there still debtors' prisons? And the men look at him just like, well, yeah, but most people would not go to those places, or they'd rather die than to go to those places. Instead of being compassionate, Ebenezer says, well, if they want to die, they should just get on with it and reduce the surplus population. He's ready to write them off. Nice guy, huh? Not so much. It shows how far he's fallen, because he and Alice used to be on the same wavelength. And what is Alice doing on Christmas Day? She's with the lame, the sick, and the poor, helping them, showing them that they have worth. She's living up to what we read when we get to Micah chapter 6, verse 8, right? Everybody knows what that says? What does the Lord require of you? Do you remember it? To act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Love mercy. It's important 2 words. So how are we as a congregation showing that we love mercy? I'm happy to tell you we're off to a good start here. Anybody who walked in today and saw our table of diapers out here, happy to tell you that was empty yesterday morning. The folks who came to the Nativity Festival yesterday, a lot of them brought in diapers with them because they saw our flyer that said we're collecting diapers for the Ballard Center. There are about 240 diapers on the table right now. Luckily, Friday, the table was full, so I texted my friend Kyle over here and said, hey, I need to bring diapers over. I just ended up just going over there and knocking on the door. We took about 550 diapers. So since the end of September, this congregation, you've provided about 2,200 diapers. It's a good number. Okay? Now, we have a long way to go. But that is tremendous help. That is assistance. That is showing love to other people. You provided hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of cookies and those handwritten notes to the teachers at Woodlawn Elementary School. I'm on their site council, and every time that I meet, somebody new is on there, and they bring up, I still keep that card that somebody wrote to me. It's hanging in my classroom. That's showing love to other people. Now, we'll continue to find other things, and we'll continue to try to do different things. But those are 2 really tangible ideas that we've been able to do to help show love to others. Finally, Ebenezer is taken to the home of Bob Cratchit, his clerk. And Ebenezer sees something there that he's just totally not sure about. It's a totally foreign concept to him. These are poor people who are happy. They love each other. They accept what they have, and they embrace the abundance that they have. They don't see that they don't have a lot like everyone else. They rejoice in what they actually do have. Ebenezer sees a daughter who's been off at work, coming home to provide more resources for the family and just to spend time with her loved ones. He sees a son excited when his dad tells him that he's found him an apprenticeship, because the son now knows he can help contribute to the family's well-being, caring for people that they love. And of course, the youngest you know really well, it's Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim teaches Ebenezer a lesson about Jesus Christ. It's just a small line in the movie. It's a little bit longer in the book, but still it's easy to miss. He talks about how he wants to show that he can be happy and joyful even though he's lame, because he wants other people in the church to see what Jesus would have seen. Someone who loves other people regardless. And so he wanted to build people's faith in the person who was the great healer. That's what he wants to do. And that's Tiny Tim. He's showing words of wisdom there. Words of wisdom that we hear sometimes we often quote St. Francis of Assisi. Have you heard that one? It's textbook with Tiny Tim here. Preach the gospel continually, at all times. When necessary, use words. Think about that and let that sink in for just a moment. That's what Tiny Tim's doing. Well, the family gathers around this table, and they have this really meager-looking goose, and they have just a little bit of pudding or a little bit of cake. Depends on which version you look at. It's a pittance compared to what Ebenezer could have afforded. And they're happy about it. They feel blessed that they have that. They're blessed about the abundance. You see, the love that they show, that's the love of being in relationship, true relationship with other people. People that you love. People that you care about. And we all have people like that in our lives. Family, sometimes it's close friends. People that you, honest to goodness, truly believe you're in a relationship with, and you have real love for them. Now, I couldn't bring up Tiny Tim without doing some research for you, because every time I talk about this with anybody, or it's a book club or whatever, they always bring up, well, what did Tiny Tim have? Well, we don't really know, because Dickens, for whatever reason, didn't actually give him a diagnosis, but there's a website that looks at different ailments and stories and tries to diagnose the people based on what they tell us about the character. So here's the fun one. This is Tiny Tim. Most likely it was something called renal tubular acidosis. Yeah, say that fast 3 times. What it is, it's an ailment where the acid builds up in your kidneys, and your body can't expel it, and it causes weakness and partial paralysis. It stunts your growth, hence Tiny Tim with the crutch. Now, in today's society, it's totally treatable. There is a regimen of medications you can take, and this is not a problem, as long as you take the medications. But in 1843 England, the expense for this would have never been on the scale of anything that Bob Cratchit could have afforded on the money that he made with Ebenezer Scrooge as his boss. When the Spirit replies, Scrooge asks the question, what's going to happen to Tiny Tim? And the Spirit says, I foresee a crutch in the corner without an owner. In other words, he says that Tiny Tim's not going to make it. That's the first time in the book Ebenezer Scrooge sheds a tear. In the movie, the body language as he's kind of knocked back, and all of a sudden he starts to feel something that he hasn't felt in years. He's not so unfeeling after all. He's starting to show compassion. He's starting to realize mercy. He's starting to actually feel love. And for the first time in a really long time, it's love for someone, not himself. Last thing with the Ghost of Christmas Present. Before he leaves, Ebenezer notices something under his robe. And so he pulls back his robe, and there's two children there. They both look like they've got claws for hands. They're skinny and sick looking. And he asks, who are they? And it goes to Christmas present, says, beware these two. This boy is ignorance, and this girl is want. Beware both of them, because they are going to wear on your soul, but especially the boy. Ignorance. It's ignorance that Ebenezer, he faced. Because remember what he didn't do. Ebenezer was ignorant of his own self-absorption. Ebenezer was ignorant of the plight of other people. He was ignorant of the difference between his wants and others' needs. So I pray that we aren't ignorant in today's society. I pray that we recognize and that we show love to others who have less than us, to others who are hurting, to those who have not been blessed to the extent that we have been. I want to close today with how we started. We started with the love chapter today in our responsive reading, 1 Corinthians. I'm going to condense it a little bit, verses 4 through 8. Love is patient, love is kind. It isn't jealous. It doesn't brag. It isn't arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't seek its own advantage. It isn't irritable. It doesn't keep a record of complaints. Love isn't happy with injustice, but it is happy with the truth. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Brothers and sisters, may we be instruments of love this week and beyond. May we recognize the plights of other people. May we look beyond our own families and friends. May we seek love in community. May we seek love because we show mercy. And may we seek love through relationship with others. Next week, Ebenezer is going to get the final jolt. And with him, we're going to get to experience what is the fourth lesson of Advent. And it's the most important thing that Ebenezer still needs to learn. Out there is indeed joy.